Hello and welcome to the Kim Iversen Show. Thank you guys so much for being here. Sorry about Monday and Tuesday not having any shows. I've got to tell you guys, my house is under construction right now, and we thought that we had fixed the water damage. We had gone through massive construction since April, getting rid of from a leak that happened in February when we had a lot of really bad storms in LA. And what happened was we went through a massive it damaged quite a bit of the house. So we did a massive rebuild. We finished the rebuild on Saturday, only for the storm. We had Hurricane Hillary, appropriately named, show up on Sunday, and you won't believe it, it wasn't fixed. And so water came streaming into my house, and we had to stop it at all costs, and the house is now still under construction. So that is why there was no show on Monday or Tuesday. And that is also why this week is going to be a little bit different. I'm going to be doing my typical long form Friday show each night this week. So I've got a guest for you tonight that you're going to love, Ed Dowd. I have another guest for you tomorrow. We're going to be talking about child sex trafficking. And then Friday, another guest for you. So long form guest this week because yours truly is under construction, and it's just never ending. And one of these days, I hope it does end, and I hope that I can get back into the studio. So I am I'm in Idaho right now in a remote studio. So I had to fly here and set it up, and here we are. So I appreciate your patience, but that is what's going on with the show right now. So that's just a little peek into the inner workings of trying to produce this show for you every night. Which I didn't do Monday and Tuesday. Sorry about that, but I'm here now. So tonight we're going to be having, like I said, we have Ed Dowd here, really going to have a great conversation. We're going to be digging into the Maui fires and just the absolute mismanagement that caused so much devastation. What was behind the unthinkable failures? I mean, it was just failure after failure after failure. Is there more than what we're being told? So tonight, Ed Dowd is somebody who pays attention. So if there's something amiss, you know that he would tell us, because you know Ed as the former hedge fund manager with various companies, including Blackrock, who started digging into the pandemic death statistics from insurance companies, excess deaths that have skyrocketed in groups who did not die from COVID. So what did they die from? That's what Ed explores in his new book, Cause Unknown: The Epidemic of Sudden Deaths in 2021 and 2022. We're going to be talking about those numbers after we talk about the Maui fires. Ed lives in Maui full time. And again, this is a guy that looks at the numbers. He looks at data. He's very, that he's very straight with that stuff. And so if there's something amiss in Maui, Ed is absolutely going to be telling us about that. But before we get to tonight's conversation, let me tell you about our sponsor. And this is, it just ends up being a very timely sponsor for what we're talking about tonight. And that is 4patriots.com. 4patriots.com is a company that's dedicated to helping Americans prepare for whatever comes their way, some sort of disaster, pandemic, fires. I mean, you just never know what is going to happen and what is going to potentially wipe out your food or grocery store supplies, emergency supplies. And 4Patriots is going to get you prepared, and they're going to get you everything you need to keep yourself on the ready in case something really terrible happens. They offer a wide range of survival gear like thermal blankets, generators, water filtration kits. They have a lot of different choices of survival food kits that range in size from quick 72-hour kits that you could pack in your car to a year's supply of food, because you never know if there's going to be a pandemic and they say no grocery stores, nobody can go in there. So if you're worried about something happening, I mean, if you see what's happened in Maui and you think that could happen to any one of us, maybe not that particular disaster, but a different disaster, I mean, you just never know what's going to happen. Then get yourself ready. Be prepared for that disaster. Go to 4patriots.com and stock up on the various different survival and emergency supplies that you need. They also just have things that'll help you get through summer heat and winter. Maybe you're just needing to stay cool, or you want even some garden and camping gear. Check it out. Go to 4patriots.com. Use promo code Kim at checkout for 10% off your order. Again, 4patriots.com. Use the promo code Kim at checkout for 10% off your order. All right, let's get to tonight's show. Very excited to be talking to Ed Dowd tonight. Ed, welcome to the show. Thank you so much for being here.
Thanks for having me on again, Kim. Glad to be here.
So you live in Maui.
Correct.
How are you doing? Were you affected by these fires?
So there's two things going on. There was a horrendous fire that wiped out the town of Lahaina on the west side. That is all true. The mainstream media made it seem like all of Maui was burning, and now we have an economic problem here on Maui. Tourists aren't coming. The rest of the island's open, so it's the island didn't burn. There were fires in Lahaina, Kula, which is called upcountry on the volcano of Haleakala, that were also raging. And then there was what I think was an arson fire near my town, Kihei, that was tacked on later that day. I have eyewitnesses that saw people in the fields. And we've had an arson problem on Maui for a long time.
Why do you have an arson problem? Who
Uh,
who's
the, the,
who's wanting to light
yeah,
fires?
we have an underworld here. We have a meth addiction problem, and a lot of these meth homeless people like to light fires, unfortunately.
So the give me a percentage. Give us an idea. So Lahaina, did the town completely burn? Is it completely gone?
Well, so most of what's called Front Street, old historic Lahaina town, is gone, and then surrounding native, a lot of local Hawaiians, and some of my friends rented there too. That's gone. It's like a couple square miles, just obliterated. Looks like Dresden firebombing.
So what percentage of the island is that? So because many of us were under the impression from, like you said, mainstream media that all of Maui went up in flames. What percentage is that area, would you say? Kind of
It's,
giving a guess.
uh, so it's called the West Side, and I live on Maui year round, and I joke with people here. I go to L.A. more than I do Lahaina,
Okay.
because Lahaina has got a single lane highway into it, and it has the same beaches that I have and the same restaurant type food. So we don't go there unless a friend really wants us to go visit. So a lot of us don't go out that way. But the south side where I live is open. All the hotels here are open. There's a lot of tourism still that could be going on, but I know countless workers who have lost their jobs. The island is like basically abandoned at the moment. Traffic's down. You can just see it. It's kind of devastating. The governor told tourists to leave and not come back.
Yeah.
And now it's like COVID all over again, where people are now economically affected outside of the Lahaina town area.
Yeah. Yeah. I actually saw on social media people saying don't come to Hawaii. I was actually scheduled to come to Hawaii and for a vacation. Actually, would have been on vacation starting this next Monday, but I was told don't go to Hawaii, and I wasn't even going to Maui. I mean, I was planning on going to like Waikiki and North Shore, the and doing all of that touristy kind of stuff. But I was told by the person that I was booking the trip with, and they said, "Oh, maybe it's not a good idea to go to Hawaii right now." And so I can't. So I did cancel that trip, unfortunately. That's the impression that the rest of us are getting. I've never even been to Hawaii. I thought it was gonna be my first time. It's gonna be a fun time. Wasn't planning on going to Maui, but yeah, I mean that's so you're saying that economically is causing a big problem for people.
Absolutely. I was at the beach. I hadn't gone to the beach in the last couple of weeks because I've been helping out, trying to with relief efforts. But I finally went to take a break, and I was sitting next to some hotel workers who were just laid off. And so and the restaurant business is way down. I mean, it's devastating, the economic collapse that we've seen from the telling people not to come.
Yeah.
And I was told, I put out on my social media by lots of people here to say it's still open, and it is. I mean, I have a friend who just arrived today who's going to spend the next 5 days. She asked me if she should come. I said absolutely. I mean, the next day after the fires, it was business as usual. People were going to work, restaurants were operating. So there was this kind of this media misperception, which we now have come to expect. They have an agenda to promote, and the agenda is climate change. And so they wanted to give the impression that Maui was devastated. And I received so many text messages that I've still not answered from hundreds and thousands of people wanting to know if I'm alive. And
Yeah.
this is the kind of thing that we have to deal with now. I think we're in an age of full spectrum deception where just everything that can be used to twist to a narrative is being used.
So, like I said, I've never been to Hawaii, but if a person were to travel into Maui, do they go to Lahaina? Is that a popular tourist destination, or are they going other places?
They can go to Lahaina, but most people, if you go to Lahaina, a lot of people stay in the hotels in Lahaina, and you're kind of, it's an hour to get out of Lahaina. So if you go to Lahaina, you're kind of going to stay in Lahaina. But if you go to anywhere else in Maui, you're basically the whole island is accessible. Lahaina's on there's two mountain ranges in a valley. They're on the smaller mountain range on the west side, and it takes about an hour from where I live to get there.
Hmm.
And if you're traveling from upcountry, it'd take you an hour and 45 minutes. So the rest of the island's open, and people who are local business owners and employees of those local, a lot of the locals are employed. They want tourists to come if they
Yeah.
can.
Well, maybe I'll rebook, and maybe this time make it for Maui, so that kind of helps support rebuild in that. I just think people feel bad. Also, it's like there's so much devastation. There's so many people missing, and I want to get into that. That it just feels wrong to go on a vacation and sunbathe and have a great time and drink drinks while people are suffering on a part of the island. It feels, it just doesn't feel right. But it also, you're right, it's not right to then let the rest of the island suffer and economically collapse because one part is, there's devastation all the time, all around the country, actually, and all around the world, but it doesn't stop us from enjoying ourselves. So maybe it shouldn't in this way, I suppose. Let's get to the numbers. You're a numbers guy. That is why you're so great with COVID. And we're going to get to those numbers as well later on. But let's talk about the Maui numbers, first of all, before we get into there's a lot of conspiracy theories. And maybe they're conspiracy realities, not sure when it comes to this fire. And you sort of touched on it a little bit with the climate change. I think a lot of people are thinking there's an agenda here. There's definitely a narrative to push, and it's being used again, kind of like COVID, for a mental narrative that we're wanting to get people to think and believe and behave a certain way. So they're claiming right now, I think the number at this moment is like 115 or 120 people who have been killed by this fire. But there's, according to the numbers that I'm seeing, but maybe you have different numbers, that there's an additional 800 or 850 people who are still missing. What numbers do you have?
So let me go through the numbers. So early on, I put out a tweet because I verified it from a couple different sources from first responders. They thought the death count was going to be 500 to 1,000. That was that, and so that was I went out with that because I thought that I got it from multiple people, and that's what we call the coconut wire here on Maui. And Maui, you got to understand, is permanent residents are 150,000. So we're 1 or 2 degrees separated from everybody on this island. So word travels fast.
Hmm.
So I put that number out. The governor came out after a disastrous public relations effort by the mayor to put numbers on it because I think he's trying to distance himself from the local government. He put out over 1,000 still missing. We have officially 114 dead, and now he admitted a lot of them are going to be children. Unfortunately, there's a whisper number out there of 200 to 400 children likely perished in the fires. They canceled school in the morning because of the high winds. A lot of these parents both work and people were left at home, unfortunately. So it's a tragedy that's unfolding. A lot of the efforts I think you've seen in kind of keeping information suppressed is they don't want this getting out because it will cause a cry of angst and anger in the community. So they've been suppressing the numbers, in my humble opinion.
Of the children in
But
particular, you think?
the children in particular,
Yeah,
the governor came out on Face the Nation on Saturday and said, there's over 1,000 missing. Which at this point, if you're still missing, you're likely presumed dead.
right.
The 850 number, this is interesting. The mayor put out the 850 number, and we have there's a Google Doc floating around the community, crowdsourced with lots of disclaimers of people missing and found and or still missing and or dead. And the list started out at 1,400 people, and as of Sunday, when I sorted the spreadsheet, there were 885 still missing. But again, disclaimers. You have to. The person has to be added to the list, so there could be more. So we think the mayor
Mm.
used the Google Doc info to get his number. This is where we are in local government. The inability to come up with estimates is beyond me.
Yeah, this is just really tragic. Why, when I hear about all the failures, let's go through the failures of this fire,
Oh
first
yeah.
of all, the laundry list. So, where would you say it start? Do you think it started with telling kids to stay home because of the high winds, or, was that like the first thing? And then there was, what would you say was the first failure or the
Well,
first like unfortunate event?
I will say that was that added salt to the wounds. I don't think that was the first failure. I think it probably was prudent not to send kids to school with 90-mile-an-hour winds.
Right.
So that made sense. But what this let me give you the kind of the timeline. So there was a fire up there's so Lahaina has old Lahaina town had the highway would just run through Front Street, and it was a log jam. A couple of years ago, about 6-7 years ago, they built what's called the Lahaina overpass, which goes parallel to Front Street, but it's a highway. And then it swerved into Lahaina town between Front Street and the rest of Lahaina town. And there was a fire up there, and they closed down the bypass. And then around noon, they issued fire was contained. So no one knew anything. People were made to feel better. And then something happened. The winds took down some power lines. Something happened. It's still unclear. There was potentially a gas station that exploded, but I have eyewitnesses that saw power lines going down,
Hmm.
and fires started popping up in Lahaina. And the first thing they didn't do is they didn't sound the siren system we have, or one of the best siren systems in the planet. They go off every month. The first of every Monday of every month, they go off. They test them. We have them in Kihei. They're in Kahului. They're all over the island. They're in Lahaina, and they didn't sound the alarms. The initial story was they were broken, and the governor repeated that lie. And then it was found out that there was a decision not to sound the alarms because it's a tsunami warning system, which they claim. But if you go to the website, there are other reasons they sounded: terrorist attacks,
Right.
fires, you name it. So that was a lie too. But the official decided not to sound the alarm, and his reasoning was he didn't want people to run to higher ground where the fire was above Lahaina town on the overpass. Well, that turned out to be an error of epic proportions, because I have eyewitnesses that told me they didn't know there was a fire until they smelled it, opened their door, and they saw buildings burning. So that
Wow.
could have saved lives,
Yeah.
probably.
But where would have
So
people gone? So if there was this alarm and by the way, did this alarm go off, when there was that missile warning of incoming missile to Hawaii, do you think that type of alarm would have gone off with that, or was that like a cell phone text?
we all got cell phone texts that
Okay.
we were going to get obliterated by a nuclear bomb at
Right.
7 a.m. in the morning.
Right.
Yes.
Okay. So this is maybe a different system. So if people are trained to believe that this is a tsunami warning system, then would they have gone to higher, like where do you think people would have gone if they would have heard this alarm during a fire?
Well, they just would have walked out of their homes and seen the fire.
Okay.
That was the problem. Was if you're in your home and unless the smoke seeped in, you didn't know anything was going on.
Got it.
Um, so that's error number one. Error number two was the hydrants didn't work for some reason. We're not sure why. That needs to be investigated.
Right. And that's a big one.
Then,
That's the water.
yeah,
The water fights fires as far as I'm concerned, right? Water puts fire out. So why you don't have any knowledge of why there was no water.
there was a rumor floating, which I've not confirmed, that they hadn't been tested in a while, so maintenance had been not done, and so they were perhaps not working in unison together. That hasn't been confirmed, but we do know the hydrants didn't work. We also know there was a squabble with the Department of Land and Natural Resources to release water to Lahaina town down below, and they decided not to until it was too late. So
Okay.
that was another epic disaster.
Yeah. Let's just go back to the fire hydrant one for a minute here. None of them worked, or some of them in some
No,
areas.
none of them worked, and we don't know whether there was no pressure or they just didn't work. This needs to be investigated. That's still
Yeah.
unclear. That's still unclear at this point.
So the
Uh,
firefighters would show up and they didn't have water.
they had no water. There was no spraying. There was no spraying of any buildings. It was a fire that raged without any efforts to fight it because they had no water.
Gosh, this is a genuine, I mean, a disaster, a beyond disaster. This is
Yeah,
why people believe there's like something else that has gone on here, because how do you not have water in the fire hydrants for the fire? You'd think the firefighters would at least know, oh, they're under maintenance. Oh no, we have to, I don't know, something else, whatever the backup plan is. If that there's, you think that that would be something you're notified of, that yeah, so that definitely has to be investigated for sure. So then what
and
was the
then
next thing?
well, then also there was because the bypass was closed, even though the fire had been contained earlier. They for some reason, and we still don't know why, there was an inability to get out of Lahaina town through Front Street to exit, and it was and there were down power lines. So that may be some of the cause of it, that the police didn't want people driving over down power lines. So I'm not going to say there was an order to kill people or anything like that, but there was an
Right.
epic failure to evacuate Front Street, and so there were reports that police were blocking the exit. We don't know why yet. AP just reported today that there was a block. So it's become officially an AP report that the Front Street was blocked, and those who disobeyed and left their cars and ran to higher ground lived, and those who stayed in their cars died, unfortunately. So uh, again, that needs to be investigated. Um, and again, I'm not going to blame the poor police officers who just took orders to do whatever they were doing. But there could have been there could have been down power lines ahead that were flaring up, and they didn't
Yeah.
want cars driving over them. We don't know, so that needs to be investigated. So it was basically, a comedy of errors. And then let's talk about Hawaiian Electric. The power went down in the morning, but then mysteriously somehow it went back on in the afternoon, and that's when Lahaina Town, that's when transformers were literally utility poles were falling into gas stations, and once the propane tanks started going, because every restaurant in Lahaina has propane tanks, there was explosion after explosion, is what I've heard, and then the harbor diesel caught on fire, and that blew up too. Um, so the down power lines, in my humble opinion, are the biggest thing to blame here, and the fact that the power was still on, or there was residual charges in the power lines. Again, I'm not an expert on utility power, uh, whether it's lingering there after you shut it off, but it was on, and people saw, utility poles going down and sparks flying from the lines. And there's been a charge leveled against Hawaiian Electric, whose stock is down 65% since this incident, because they're going to get sued. There's been a charge level that they had not done maintenance and cleared away the trees from the power lines. And they've been working instead on, they actually admitted to this problem. And instead, they've been working on their green energy
Right.
initiatives. Because it costs money to, prune back the trees and send out crews, I guess.
Right. That's what I'd heard as well, that power companies across the country are being pressured into green initiatives, green energy. And a lot of it is not just political pressure or societal pressure, but it's also, I would think, business pressure. You're being told that your business may be regulated away, and that they're going to force a regulation to go towards this other green energy. And you don't want a competitor to come along and be the one to take over and you go completely out of business. It's better if you, I guess, pivot and focus on that. But in doing that, they then they've neglected the maintenance of the current existing structure that we have and that we rely on. I mean, do you think there's something to that? Is that what's happening?
Absolutely. So I used to be an electric utility analyst on Wall Street for 2 years, and there's three parts to an electric utility. There's the generation service part, there's the transmission service part, and then there's the retail service part, the customers. And they've been clearly lacking in keeping up the transmission investment, which is the power lines.
Hmm.
So they've been trying to get new sources of generation, and they've been, putting in the smart meters in everyone's home. But I guess there wasn't enough money in the till to prune back the trees.
Yeah. Yeah. Or just even maybe there's got to be I mean, it's a tough situation to be in, I think, as a power company. I mean, obviously, they need to be doing the maintenance of the trees and whatnot. But on the day of, when you're trying to make a decision on whether or not to cut power because you think there might be a dangerous event, how do you make that decision? Because if you cut power, then you're going to potentially result in other dangerous events when people don't have power and they need access to power, and it ends up killing them that they don't have that access. So, how do you think companies, what kind of metrics should they use, or is there even anything that they could use in your experience that would give them a guide of this is when you cut the power so that you don't end up with a fire like Paradise in California, or what just happened in Lahaina?
I mean, I would think anytime there's hurricane force winds, you cut power because your poles are going to go down, and there's a chance that it sparks something nearby.
Yeah.
I don't know why the power went down. If in the morning, it could have been a utility pole went down and then they fixed it in the afternoon, or they decided to do the right thing and turn the power off because of the winds, and then the fire that broke out was declared all clear, so they turned the power back. We don't know. There needs to be an
Yeah.
investigation there. Again,
I
again,
mean, this,
we can speculate, but it's a comedy of errors that have resulted in the largest death toll in a wildfire, I think, to date in the history
yeah,
of the U.S. And
yeah,
it's
it
going to get
is.
bigger.
Right. Yeah, which is just devastating. I think the worst part is that people couldn't leave, and that it's like just hearing that the people who disobeyed the cops survived. The ones that said, screw you, I'm going, they survived. It's just another lesson, as we've come out of the pandemic and we had that same situation on us for a few years. It's like repeating in this, but in a at least with the pandemic, we had days and months to think about whether or not we were going to be defiant. But in this particular situation, a person has moments to decide, am I going to defy authority and run, or am I going to listen to this person who's potentially putting me in more danger and making things worse? Right. And I'm curious what the percentage is, because I mean, do you know what percentage of people, um, I don't know how you would know this number, but maybe you do. Do you know the percentage of people that just said, "I'm leaving, I'm running for the hills, and I'm getting away from, or I'm running, and I'm going to survive"? Do you
I don't
know
know the
what that number
percentage.
is?
I don't know the percentage, but I know someone personally who got out of their car and jumped into the water. A lot of people did that. So people either ran uh, earlier and just started walking into the fields, or they waited in their cars. The fires came and they jumped into the water. A lot of people jumped into the water and saved
Yeah.
themselves. I do know one story where one guy said, "Screw this." He got in his souped up pickup truck with the big tires, and he rode over the fields, jumped the road, and just drove up to the bypass and took off.
Wow. I
You know
wonder.
those kind of stories.
Yeah. Yeah, and it'd be interesting to see what he saw. If he saw downed power lines, and maybe that's, or the road was blocked and that's why. What was it that he saw? Or was it just that the cops thought the fire is going to go that way, and so we don't want people going that way, the path of the fire or something?
Yeah, yeah. Again, I'm not gonna blame the guys who blocked the road. They were just taking orders, and they
Right.
were getting
Right.
information that they got. So, I'm sure they're not feeling great about what happened.
No, of course not. I don't think anybody intentionally, in my, and we'll get to this. This will, when we talk about the COVID data, I have a hard time believing that people are so sinister that they would say, "Oh, we just need this disaster to happen and these lives to be lost." I know when I look through history that there are definitely events that lead me to believe people are actually that sinister. I just would love to believe that they're not really. So that when I hear about this fire, and when now hearing people say there's this maybe potential conspiracy, that what would have been the reason for that conspiracy to kill people, to allow this disaster to happen, and to essentially sacrifice these people for the greater good, whoever that evil, sinister person. Nobody ever thinks they're evil, right? They think, I'm doing this for the greater good. There's a bigger reason why, and it'll save more lives in the end, or it'll be better for humanity in the end if we just sacrifice these few. What do you think would have been the reason if there was that sort of conspiracy?
The conspiracies I'm hearing are that it's they're setting up for the 15-minute cities. It's a land grab to develop new condos and hotels
Right.
and whatnot. Now, look, if I found evidence of that, I would come to you and we'd talk about it. Right now, that's all speculation. What I do know is true is a phenomenon called disaster capitalism. And
Mm,
Naomi Klein has written about it, others have written about it, that once a disaster happens, there are sharks and vultures who come in to take and capitalize on the situation. And I
yeah.
have no doubt that the governor wants to grab land for the state. I have no doubt developers want to lowball people. And we're going to try our best on Maui to prevent that from happening. So forget whether it was a conspiracy or not. The aftermath is that will be attempted.
Yeah.
I have no doubt about that at all.
Yeah, I mean that happens with any disaster. I mean, people who lost their homes after in the 2008 crisis, people swooped in, capitalists swooped in, and grabbed venture capital, vulture capitalists, I should say, swooped in and bought the homes and rented them out. We see that during the pandemic, even here in California, they were talking about, oh, people are losing their businesses, they're losing their homes, they're losing or their buildings, and so we could buy these for dirt cheap. I mean, the mayor, or it was maybe I don't remember which official was saying that, but they literally said that. I think it might have even been Gavin Newsom on a call saying, "Well, now we can buy up these buildings that are going under for dirt cheap, and it'll be government owned." I mean, insane. But yeah, this is definitely what happens. Is that the disaster going in there and definitely capitalizing on that. um, so what is happening now? So now there's going to obviously be an investigation with the Maui fires. There's going to be more knowledge about who survived and who didn't. The number's likely to go way up. You're right. If there's still 850 people missing, where are those people? Likely not alive, unfortunately. What happens now with everybody? I mean, Maui. So Hawaii, interestingly, is a really liberal state. You probably had a lot of people there who do buy into we have to, the 15-minute city. We have to do what we can with climate change. Do you think people are going to go more in that direction with allow the government to control more and do more and rely on the government more? It seems like after a disaster like this, the last people you would trust are the government because they've
I
totally
think
failed.
so. The local Hawaiians are a kind, peaceful people, but there is a movement here called the separatist movement that's been going on for years, and they're for the most part peaceful. I got a feeling, and I've heard anecdotally, the local Hawaiians are no longer trusting of the government.
Yeah.
And the separatist movement is going to gain steam. There's going to be there's already community organizers. I delivered some goods to some of them. They're great people. They're going to talk to everybody who lost a home, and they're going to try to unite everybody and not sell. So they're going to be united front. They're not going to give in. We have a lawyer that apparently a constitutional lawyer is going to come help with efforts to push back on the government land grabs and or developers trying to steal the land. So there's a lot of things going on here. I put out a tweet saying Maui is the line in the sand on disaster capitalism. So I think, from what I can tell, the Hawaiians are no longer buying what the government is selling. And the only people who are going to buy this are the trust fund hippies that live on Maui that think the world is peachy and they'll love the 15-minute city. But anybody who's a working class person knows that 15-minute city is slavery.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, the entire concept ultimately of you will own nothing and you will be happy is essentially slavery. Oh, who does own it? Well, the person who owns all that is in control of you, ultimately, is how that would work. So, well, how can people help? What's the best? I mean, besides booking trips and actually, you're saying go on vacation to Hawaii, go to Maui, go on vacation, spend money, go to the restaurants, go to the hotels. Besides that, how else can we help?
On Twitter and Getter, I posted a Google Doc that you could send money directly to victims. It was a doc put together that has GoFundMe's and stories and need. And that's the best way to do it. I put it on Twitter closer to the date of the fires. My Twitter handle's at Dowd Edward, DOWD Edward. I'll retweet it after I get off the show with you.
Yeah.
So it'll be at the top of my feed. And I'm also on Getter at Edward Dowd. That I think is the best way to give money directly. There's about, at the time I posted it, there were 600 families or individuals. You can pick and choose whatever story calls to you to give. And I think that for me, that's what I wanted to see. I didn't want it to go to somebody setting up a nonprofit and then clipping 85% of it for themselves.
Right. Yeah. All right, now that, it actually is, I feel like in a lot of ways, a very similar situation, what happened in Maui and Lahaina and the COVID disaster, people trusting the government a bit too much, doing what they said, the government thinking this is what's best for you, whether it's we're going to preserve water resources, or with COVID lockdown, right? It's such I mean, this happened so quickly in Lahaina, but it was like watching the last 3 years unfold in a short period of time with a major disaster. Tell us about the numbers now. You've written the book, Cause Unknown, the epidemic of sudden deaths in 2021 and 2022. Where are we at with the deaths?